The curse was older than his crown, older than the throne of stone upon which his ancestors once ruled. From the moment Selim first drew breath, the gods marked him, not with glory, not with favor, but with fire that punished every attempt at love. The first time a woman reached for him, a simple brush of fingers meant to comfort a frightened child, his skin seared. Her scream pierced the halls of his father's keep, and the stench of burned flesh lingered for days. They said he was unholy, touched by wrath, a child no woman could cradle, no mother could soothe. Years did not break the curse, they deepened it. Maidens fled at his presence. Warriors whispered behind his back. Counselors urged him to take power, to command legions, to rule without weakness. And he did. He became the Alpha King, unmatched in strength, undefeated in battle, a figure carved from stone and fury. But inside, he was hollow. For every woman who dared approach him, every spark of connection ended in agony. Their touch blistered, their love destroyed. He was doomed to remain mateless, bound to a throne that grew colder with each passing season. Now, alone in the storm-slashed forest, his breath came like the roar of a beast caged too long. Rain slicked across his bare shoulders, washing blood from shallow wounds scored by branches. His fists were clenched, his jaw locked, every muscle in his body alive with rage at the heavens. "Why?" he growled to the sky, voice raw. "Why me? Why this curse?" Lightning cracked, splitting the night open, but no answer came. Only thunder, rolling like cruel laughter. He stumbled deeper into the wilderness, each step heavier than the last. And then, he froze. Not because of the storm. Not because of his pain. But because of a sound. A heartbeat. It raced fast, wild, unsteady, and it did not belong to him. He turned, nostrils flaring, senses sharpening like blades. Through the mist, through the drowning rain, came the fragile rhythm of a girl running for her life. He should have ignored it. He should have turned away. He had sworn never to endanger another with his cursed presence. But something about that sound pierced deeper than thunder, deeper than his torment. Celine was no stranger to pain. The ground tore at her bare feet, thorns slicing skin until trails of blood marked her passage. She could not see the path, had never seen it, not the forest, not the storm, not even her own reflection. Darkness was her world, blindness her curse. Yet tonight, the darkness was mercy. Tonight, it was the only thing hiding her from the eyes of those who hunted her. Her clan's voices still haunted the edges of her mind. Omen. Cursed. Blind one. They had cast her out beneath the moon, banishing her with the fury of wolves who feared what they could not understand. She had run ever since, guided not by sight but by instinct, every breath of wind, every snap of a twig, every vibration of the earth beneath her telling her where danger lay. And danger was everywhere. Her lungs burned, her ribs ached, but she did not stop. Stopping meant death. She did not know that another moved through the storm. She did not know that her heartbeat, fragile, erratic, had caught the ear of the most dangerous alpha ever cursed by the gods. And when their paths collided, everything changed. Selim stepped forward, shadows clinging to his form, eyes like storms breaking through fog. For the first time in his life, the curse did not answer. His skin did not burn. His veins did not ignite with fire. The storm fell away, the thunder silenced. All that remained was the fragile sound of her breath, and the impossible truth that her presence had broken the unbreakable. The blind girl and the cursed king stood on the edge of destiny, bound by the kind of fate no prophecy dared to name. And if your heart races with theirs, if you feel the storm closing in, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where love defies curses, and destiny is always written in fire. The storm had not passed, it had only shifted, pulling its fury into the marrow of the night. The trees groaned as if warning what was to come. The ground trembled faintly, and through the thick curtain of fog, the sound of wolves broke through, low, guttural snarls rolling across the forest like drums of war. Celine stiffened. Her pulse raced, ragged breaths fighting the cold air. She knew those voices, even without sight. The same wolves who had once sworn to protect her now hunted her as prey. Her own clan. The bond of pack meant nothing when fear ruled their hearts. They had cast her out, and now they meant to finish what exile had begun. Panic rose, but instinct pulled her forward. Her bare feet tore across the wet ground, skin already raw, blood marking every step. Her hands reached in front of her, brushing bark and empty air, each gesture desperate for guidance she could not see. The fog wrapped tighter, dampening every sound but the one that mattered most, the steady pursuit behind her. The snarls grew sharper, closer. She could feel them in her bones, the vibration of claws pounding against earth, the ragged hunger in their growls. They would not let her escape again. But another presence waited in the dark. Selim stood between shadow and storm, his body still as carved bronze, his jaw set with the fury of a man at war with his own fate. Rain clung to his skin, tracing the lines of scars cut deep across his chest and shoulders, marks of battles fought and won, but never healed inside. His eyes were not merely eyes, they were storms made flesh, lightning breaking in every flicker of his gaze. Power radiated from him, not the kind begged for in temples, but the kind that made the very air bend around him, that made even the trees bow as if they recognized their king. He heard the wolves before he saw them. He smelled their frenzy, the bitter stench of pack turned predator. His instincts surged. His curse warned him to stay apart, to remain untouched, but something greater moved within him. A heartbeat. Her heartbeat. Fragile, frantic, but strong enough to cut through storm and shadow. He had followed it, tethered by something he could not name, and now he saw her, stumbling through the mist, skin torn, hair plastered to her face by rain, sightless eyes fixed on nothing. Yet there was a kind of defiance in her run, as if even blindness could not chain her. The wolves closed in. Celine gasped as claws scraped close, the hot breath of her hunters licking against her neck. Her body tensed, ready for the final strike. She stumbled, palms slamming into the cold mud. Pain seared her knees, but she clawed forward anyway, refusing to surrender. In the same instant, the forest erupted with a sound that made even the storm falter. A roar, not just of a man, not just of a beast, but of a king who had suffered too long. Selim moved. He burst from the mist like a god carved in fury, the sheer force of his presence shaking the ground. The wolves hesitated, but it was already too late. His hand shot forward, catching the first by the throat mid-leap. Muscles flexed, tendons snapped, and with a single, merciless motion, he threw the beast into the trees. The others lunged, snarling, but his body was a weapon honed by centuries of bloodline. Fists cracked bone, claws met flesh, and every strike was deliberate, clean, brutal, absolute. Celine froze on the ground, her breath caught in her throat. She could not see what happened, but the sounds painted a picture vivid enough to shake her soul. The snap of jaws silenced mid-bite, the thud of bodies cast aside, the storm of growls broken by the deeper growl of one stronger. She pressed her palms into the mud, trembling, unsure whether to crawl or wait for death. And then silence. Only the rain remained, tapping against leaves, sliding down her bloodied skin. She forced her lips to part, whispering into the void, "Who's there?" Her voice shook, fragile but sharp with fear. Selim stepped closer, his breath heavy, the metallic tang of blood still clinging to him. He looked down at her, this girl the world had branded cursed, and something in his chest shifted. He had touched her when he pulled her away from danger, his fingers brushing against her arm. He braced himself for the curse, for the burn, for the blistering agony that always followed. But it never came. His skin did not sear. His veins did not catch fire. Instead, there was only warmth, real and startling, a contact that felt almost human. She flinched under his shadow, pulling back as if his silence were a weapon. "Please," she whispered, her sightless eyes lifting toward where she guessed he stood. "If you mean to kill me, do it quickly. Don't play with me as they did." The words cut deeper than any blade. Selim's jaw tightened. He knelt slowly, the ground shuddering under his weight, until his presence wrapped around her like a storm held in check. "If I wanted you dead," he said, his voice low, roughened by years of solitude, "you would not be speaking now." Her breath hitched. His tone carried no mercy, but no cruelty either. It was something else, conflicted, wary, as if even he did not trust the words leaving his mouth. She tilted her head, listening to the rain slide down his skin, hearing the controlled inhale of his breath. He was close. Too close. Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. "You touched me," Selim admitted, his voice raw with disbelief. And the curse did not answer. Celine frowned, confusion flashing across her pale features. "Curse?" For a moment, he said nothing, the storm filling the space between them. Then, almost as if speaking the words might break him, he confessed, "Every woman who touches me burns. Their flesh sears. Their screams haunt me. But you," his hand hovered inches above hers, trembling with restraint. "You are untouched. And so am I." The air thickened, heavy with something neither of them dared name. Attraction. Fear. The impossible weight of fate pressing them together when everything in their lives had pulled them apart. Celine swallowed hard, her throat dry. "How do you know my name?" she asked at last, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop it. Selim's gaze darkened, the storm inside him breaking open. He leaned closer, his words a confession carved from years of torment. "Because I have dreamed of your voice for as long as I can remember." The forest silence stretched after their meeting, but it did not bring comfort, it carried weight, the kind that pressed against ribs and made each breath shallow. Celine stood trembling before Selim, the soil damp beneath her wounded feet, his towering figure framed by the broken shafts of moonlight piercing the branches. His presence should have terrified her more than the wolves who had chased her, yet something deeper stirred, a recognition, as though her soul had known as long before her body had. And then memory, sharp and unwelcome, surged through her. The voices of her clan returned first. Hushed whispers. Hissing accusations. The words had clung to her since childhood. Omen. Ruin. Blindness that sees too much. A curse sent to unravel us all. She had been too young to defend herself, too small to understand why the elders recoiled when she passed. Her blindness was not a weakness, it was an otherworldly sight that unsettled them. She felt their fear more than she heard their words. She remembered the day her mother's hand slipped from hers, remembered the cold finality in her father's tone when he turned his back. Alone, marked, unwanted. That was the fate Celine carried into this night. The sting of those memories made her chest ache. She pressed her arms around herself, as though she could shield her heart from their echo. But Selim's voice cut through the fog of her past. Low, raw, and threaded with something unspoken. "You think I come to harm you," he murmured, "but I know you." Celine's head turned sharply, disbelief flooding her features. "Know me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "How could you possibly?" Selim's jaw flexed, his storm-gray eyes refusing to break from hers. There was torment in them, an old pain that seemed carved into his very bones. "Because you have haunted me long before this night," he confessed. His voice trembled, not with weakness but with the force of a truth finally spoken aloud. "In dreams, I have heard your voice. I thought it was madness, a cruel trick from the gods. Yet here you stand." Her lips parted, her breath unsteady. She wanted to laugh, wanted to deny it, but the intensity of his words burned through her doubt. For the first time, she felt someone speak not of her as an omen, not as a curse, but as someone meant. Still, fear tangled with the fragile thread of hope. "If you truly know me," she whispered, "then tell me who I am." The challenge lingered between them like a blade. Selim's chest rose and fell, as though he bore a weight too heavy for language. At last, he let the truth spill, his voice rough with memory. "I was cursed at birth," he began, eyes narrowing as he forced himself to speak the words he had buried in silence. "The gods marked me. Every woman who touched me felt only fire. Not the warmth of passion, but a burn so searing they screamed. As a child, I reached for my mother's embrace, only to hear her agony. I tried to hold my sister's hand, and she fell to her knees, shrieking. I grew with their fear etched into me. No woman could come near without pain. no love could bloom. They called me untouchable. And so I became it. His voice faltered, the confession breaking open wounds older than either of them could measure. Celine's throat tightened as she listened. She could almost see it, the lonely boy standing apart from others, afraid of his own touch, building walls of rage and pride to hide the devastation inside. A child who had longed for gentleness but learned only rejection. When your clan cast you out, Selim continued, his voice lowering, I was there. I should not have been, but I was. I heard them accuse you, saw them push you away. I stayed hidden. I told myself I had no right to intervene. Yet I could not look away. His gaze darkened, shadowed with guilt. And tonight, when they chased you, I swore I would not remain silent again. The truth hung heavy in the air. Celine staggered beneath it, not knowing whether to recoil or to reach for him. For years, she had carried her loneliness like armor. Now, in the presence of this cursed Alpha King, that armor cracked. She saw her own reflection in him, not in his strength or his command, but in his exile, his abandonment, his hunger for a connection he had never been granted. The silence between them shifted. It was no longer hollow. It was full of questions, of fear, of a fragile possibility neither dared name. Celine's voice quivered when she finally spoke. If we are both cursed, then what are we to each other? Selim's answer came slowly, each word weighted, deliberate. Maybe, salvation. Or ruin. Perhaps both. The forest seemed to listen. Even the wind hushed, the leaves stilling as though the earth itself bent closer to witness their fragile exchange. Two outcasts, bound by wounds they did not choose, standing at the edge of a fate neither fully understood. But in that charged stillness, for the first time in their lives, neither of them felt entirely alone. The hush of the forest thickened as Celine and Selim pressed deeper into the night, their silence heavy but not empty. Between them lingered truths too raw to name, too fragile to break. Celine kept close to the sound of his measured steps, every shift of his weight on damp earth guiding her through the maze of roots and stone. Her blindness sharpened what others ignored, the rhythm of his breath, the faint scrape of his scarred hand brushing bark as though steadying himself, the strange steadiness she felt in his nearness. The air changed. It carried a weight unlike before, older, watchful, steeped in echoes. Celine halted, her head tilting, her unseeing eyes lifting as if drawn by something beyond the trees. Do you feel it? She whispered, her voice trembling with wonder she did not yet understand. Selim did. The hairs at the back of his neck bristled, his chest tightening as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The forest opened into a clearing, and before them rose remnants of stone that time had not claimed. Ancient Roman pillars, fractured yet proud, stretched toward the sky, carved with wolves whose eyes glowed faintly under the moon. Vines crept around their flanks, but the carvings endured, moons, flames, beasts midshift, all etched with the precision of a forgotten hand. Celine took a step forward, barefoot and hesitant, yet drawn. Her fingers grazed the surface of one pillar. At her touch, light pulsed beneath the cracks of the stone. A breath escaped her lips, half gasp, half prayer, as lines of glowing runes unfurled across the pillar's body, snaking upward until the carvings themselves seemed to stir. Selim's storm-gray eyes widened. He had seen battlefields ignited by fire, had faced storms that shattered armies, but never had he stood in the presence of something so impossibly alive. The pillars were not ruins. They were sentinels, waiting. And then the air shifted again. A whisper, not of leaves or wind, rose around them, circling like voices too old for flesh. Words seeped from the stone, deep and resonant, threading into the marrow of their bones. The blind one shall see beyond flesh. Celine froze. The voice was not hers, not Selim's, yet it spoke through her as though the earth itself had chosen her ears. Her pulse raced, disbelief warring with the strange, aching recognition that those words were meant for her. The Alpha untouched shall burn or be reborn. Selim's throat tightened at the sound. He clenched his fists, as though he could resist the weight of destiny spoken aloud. Burn or be reborn, the curse that had defined him now echoed in prophecy. his entire life, his suffering, threaded into words carved long before his birth. Celine's hand shook as she pulled it back from the glowing stone. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, her voice frayed with desperation. "It cannot be me. I am no chosen one. I am nothing. An outcast. A mistake they wished gone." But Selim stepped closer, his shadow enveloping her, his voice unyielding. "The stone answered to you. Not to me. Not to any alpha before me. You." His gaze fell, and for the first time he noticed the faint shimmer at her wrist. The moon caught it, revealing what her clan had ignored or perhaps feared. A mark, etched like fire beneath her skin. A crescent flame, delicate yet undeniable, resting over her veins as if the gods themselves had branded her. Celine's lips trembled. She tried to cover it with her other hand, shame flooding her cheeks. "Do not look at it. Please. It means nothing. I am blind, Selim. I cannot lead. I cannot fulfill prophecy. I am not what they whisper." But Selim caught her wrist, not with force but with reverence, his hand engulfing hers. And as his skin met hers, no fire burned. No curse flared. Only heat, alive and steady. His voice dropped, rough with awe. "This mark is not nothing. And you are not nothing. You are the flame they feared, the sight they could not control." The whisper swelled again, circling them both. Together, shadow and fire. Together, ruin or rebirth. The words threaded into their bones, chilling yet binding, pulling them toward a truth larger than either had imagined. Selim's grip tightened as though anchoring her to him, his eyes searching her face for the resolve she could not yet see in herself. Celine shook, torn between terror and the faint spark of belief igniting within her. Her clan's condemnation still clung like chains, but the stone's light refused to dim. The ruin had awakened for her. The prophecy had named her. And Selim, cursed alpha, untouchable warrior, stood before her, no longer burning, no longer recoiling. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt alive, as though wolves carved into the stone watched with expectant eyes, as though the moons above held their breath. Destiny had stirred, ancient and unstoppable, and it had chosen them. Celine pressed her marked wrist to her chest, voice breaking as she whispered, "If this is true, if I am truly what they say, then everything I've ever known has been a lie." Selim's hand lingered at her shoulder, grounding her, his tone low, reverent, and certain. "Not a lie, Celine. A beginning." And for the first time in her life, she felt not cursed, but seen. The night split open with the sound of steel against steel, a clang so sudden it rattled through the clearing like thunder. Selim pivoted, dragging Celine behind him as shadows broke from the tree line. Wolves, men half-shifted with claws glinting like forged iron, stepped into the ruin with snarls curling their lips. Their eyes gleamed with hatred, not at Selim, but at the blind woman whose mark still pulsed with silver fire. "Witch," one spat, his voice guttural, heavy with contempt. "Defiler. She wakes the stones with trickery." Another growled, his chest broad and bare beneath the moonlight. His scars marked him as an alpha, not of Selim's bloodline but of the rival clans that had long waited for weakness. His gaze slid over Celine as though she were vermin. "You dishonor your throne, Selim, by standing with the cursed one. Step aside, or fall with her." Celine's breath caught, her hand instinctively clutching Selim's arm. She could not see their faces, but she could feel the venom in their words, the weight of centuries of hatred pressing against her frail form. She trembled, but not from cold, her body knew the terror of being surrounded, accused, hunted once more. Selim did not tremble. His eyes burned with stormlight, fury pulsing in every line of his body. He let Celine's grip linger, anchoring him, then stepped forward with a growl that made the earth quake. "You dare lay judgment in the shadow of the gods' ruin?" His voice thundered, low and dangerous. "Come, then. Test the hand you mock." The rival alphas lunged. Selim's body erupted in power, the curse that had tormented him for years now twisting into a weapon. His roar shattered the night. Storm winds howled from nowhere, whipping through the clearing, bending trees, tearing leaves into a spiral of chaos. His claws flashed, bronze skin gleaming as lightning crackled faintly across his shoulders, each strike fueled by the rage of a man denied peace his whole life. Celine could feel the storm without sight, the ground trembling under his steps, the rush of wind tearing at her hair, the crash of bodies colliding with merciless force. She pressed her palms against the stone pillar, steadying herself, then opened her ears, her skin, every part of her sharpened senses. She listened for what Selim could not hear in his fury, the scuffle of feet in the fog, the rustle of leaves betraying hidden attackers. "There, left," she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. Selim turned with inhuman speed, intercepting a rival strike, his claws raking across a throat before the blow could fall. Blood sprayed, vanishing into the storm that surrounded him. Another charged from the rear. Celine felt the shift in the air, the wrongness in the rhythm of footsteps. "Behind you." Selim spun, catching the attacker's arm, twisting until the snap echoed through the ruin. He crushed the man to the earth, eyes blazing with merciless wrath. He was fury incarnate, a god of war reborn beneath Roman stone. And for a moment, Celine thought he might truly be unstoppable. But the world was not done testing them. From the treeline came her clan. Torches flared, voices rose in unison, chants of condemnation that chilled her more than blades. They marched into the clearing, cloaked in rage and righteousness, and their leader pointed a trembling hand at Celine. "There. The cursed child." His voice broke with hatred sharpened by fear. "She twists the Alpha's heart with forbidden power. She calls storms with her touch. She will ruin us all." Hand seized her arms before she could react. Her body jerked, dragged back against the stone. The rough grip of her own kin burned worse than flame. "No." Selim's roar split the air, but the rival Alphas pressed in, cutting his path. His claws lashed, his fury carved through them, but for every man he felled, another rose. His storm grew wild, winds tearing torches into embers, lightning streaking low enough to scar the pillars themselves. Yet even his power strained beneath the weight of numbers. Celine struggled against her captors, her voice raw. "You do not understand. I did not choose this." But her words only drew snarls, spittle flying as one hissed into her ear, "You bewitched him, blind witch. You shame us all." And then came the words that sliced deeper than any claw, hurled across the ruin like a decree. "Choose, Selim. Choose your throne, or lose it for a cursed woman." The chant spread, carried by rival and kin alike, swelling into a storm of its own. "Choose. Choose. Choose." Celine's chest constricted. She turned her face toward him, though she could not see him through the chaos. Her lips parted, trembling. She wanted to believe he would never abandon her, that his storm was hers to trust. But the words cut through her heart like a blade. He was king. She was nothing but an outcast marked with ruin. What king would risk a throne for a blind woman cursed at birth? Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her as despair swallowed the faint spark the ruins had lit within her. Her voice broke on a whisper only the gods might have heard, "He will leave me. Just as they all have." And in that moment, though Selim tore through men with the fury of storms, though lightning bowed to his rage, she believed, not in prophecy, not in destiny, but in abandonment. The fracture had begun. The storm of battle faded into silence, leaving only the hiss of blood cooling on stone and the ragged edge of breath from two who had endured too much. The ruin still throbbed faintly with light, but its whispers had quieted, as if even prophecy bowed to exhaustion. Selim dragged Celine from the hands of those who would damn her, his grip fierce, unyielding. She could not see the bodies scattered, nor the smoke curling low from scorched earth, but she could hear it all, the groans of the broken, the crackle of dying torches, the heartbeat of a king who had nearly lost himself to rage. They did not stop running until the forest swallowed them whole. Fog clung to their skin, damp and heavy, muffling every step until even pursuit seemed to surrender. When Selim finally slowed, he led her into the mouth of a cave cut deep into stone, shielded by jagged rock and the hiss of water dripping somewhere in the dark. Inside, silence returned, thick and intimate. Selim struck flint to spark, and firelight spread across the cave's walls, painting shadows that danced with quiet reverence. The glow touched Celine's face, softening her trembling features, tracing the lines of weariness carved too deeply for her years. She sat on the cool stone, her hands clasped tight in her lap, as though still bracing for the accusations that rang in her ears. Selim crouched before her, his chest still rising and falling with uneven breath. He studied the shallow cuts along her legs where thorns had sliced, the bruises already darkening along her arms where her clan had seized her. His hands hovered, hesitant, for he had lived a lifetime where touch meant pain, rejection, fire. Yet here was no burn, no recoil. Only the fragile possibility of care. Slowly, reverently, he reached for her ankle. His fingers brushed her skin, tracing over a scrape as he cleaned it with cloth torn from his tunic. Celine flinched, not from pain, but from the strangeness of tenderness where she had only known cruelty. Her lips parted, voice trembling like a secret too heavy to keep. "Why?" she asked, her blind eyes lifting toward the warmth of the fire. "Why do you touch me when no one else ever has? Why risk yourself for me?" Selim's jaw tightened. He pressed the cloth gently against another wound, his voice low, almost breaking. "Because you are the only one I can touch without fire consuming me. Because when my curse met you, it faltered. And because his words faltered, caught between honesty and fear. I have known you, Celine, long before tonight." Her breath hitched. She turned her face toward him, her unseeing gaze searching. How? How could you know me?" He dropped the cloth, his hand rising without thought to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed along her skin, rough from battle but tender in its hesitation. "In dreams," he whispered. "For years, your voice came to me when I closed my eyes. Soft, calling through the dark. I thought it was torment. I thought it was madness. But now I see you. And I know it was you all along." Celine's heart thundered in her chest. She had felt it too, the sense of eyes upon her when she wandered alone, the strange comfort in her sleep as though someone guarded her from afar. She had never spoken of it, never dared, fearing it was proof of her curse. Yet hearing him confess, her throat tightened with something that felt like release. Her fingers lifted, trembling, until they brushed against his wrist where it still cupped her face. Her touch was feather-light, testing, uncertain. "All my life," she murmured, "I thought the shadows mocked me. But it was you. Watching. Protecting. Even when I did not know." His breath deepened, his hand steady against her cheek. "Not protecting enough. I should have come sooner." The fire cracked softly between them, heat pressing close but not suffocating. In that cave, the world outside ceased to matter, no rivals, no clans, no gods whispering doom. Only the fragile hush of two souls who had carried curses alone and now, for the first time, found they were not alone at all. Celine's lips parted, her breath trembling. Her body leaned unconsciously toward him, drawn by the gravity of his presence, the storm in his eyes that softened only for her. His hand lingered, the warmth of his palm anchoring her. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between their mouths. Her lips hovered near his, her chest rising with unsteady rhythm. But then, fear cracked through. Her body stiffened, her voice breaking like glass. "Selim, can a cursed blind woman ever be enough for a king?" Silence fell, heavy, raw. Her words were not a question of love but of worth, a lifetime of shame spilling into the firelit cave. Selim leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, his voice low, fierce, unshakable. "I see you, Celine. All of you. Not as cursed. Not as broken. You are more than enough. You are the only one who has ever been enough." Her breath shattered on a sob, soft and unbidden, as though his words carved chains from her shoulders. She pressed her cheek into his hand, no longer resisting the truth he offered. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe she was not a burden but chosen, not an outcast but seen. The fire crackled, and their silence deepened, not from fear but from the intimacy of something too sacred for words. The storm outside their refuge had not ended, but in that cave, between them, the first fragile thread of trust began to weave. The sacred circle had always been a place of unity, a ground where wolves set aside rivalries to honor the moon. Tonight, it became a stage for betrayal. Torches burned high around the ancient stone altar, their light dancing over faces twisted in anticipation. Celine stood beside Selim, her pulse a war drum in her chest. For a moment, she believed she belonged, that perhaps destiny's cruelty had finally bent into something resembling grace. But the illusion shattered when her clan stepped forward, their voices venom-laced, their eyes sharp with the hunger to see her undone. They spoke the prophecy not as the oracle had whispered it, but as a curse reborn in twisted tongues. "Her fire will not save us," one cried, his hand stabbing the air toward her. "It will consume us all." The words echoed, multiplying like poisoned arrows in the night. Murmurs swelled, bodies shifted uneasily, and the weight of suspicion pressed down like an avalanche. Celine froze, every limb taut with the familiar terror of being seen not as a woman but as a danger. She opened her mouth to speak, but another voice cut sharper than her own, one she had once trusted. A friend. An ally. A sister in arms. Her secret spilled from her lips like venom. The girl carries powers forbidden by the moon. Blind in flesh, yes, but not in spirit. She dreams what others cannot, she feels what others should not. You think it chance the alpha has not burned beneath her touch? No, she is witch-born. Gasps tore through the circle. Growls rumbled low. Some stepped back as though her very breath carried plague. The torches seemed to hiss louder, the fire hungry to devour her as they looked at her with eyes that no longer saw kin, only danger. And then Selim's silence cut deepest of all. He did not speak. He did not shield her. His jaw clenched, his hands flexed at his sides, and his eyes, once fierce with devotion, flickered with hesitation. The silence screamed louder than any accusation. Her chest caved inward. She had bared wounds before, endured exile, blindness, mockery. But nothing compared to the hollow ache that swelled now, watching the alpha she had trusted waver between her and his throne. Her throat burned as whispers turned to shouts. Witch. Curse. Destroyer. The words coiled around her ribs, suffocating. Her vision, though blind, pulsed with something else, heat. Not the warmth of love she had clung to, but the searing blaze of fury and grief knotted together until it ignited. The earth beneath her feet trembled. The night air split with a sound like tearing metal. Her body convulsed as if the fire inside her could no longer be caged. Silver. It erupted from her fingertips, licking up her arms, spiraling outward. Flames unlike any wolf had ever seen, not gold, not red, but silver as moonlight made flesh. The nearest trees caught in an instant, their bark glowing as if the stars themselves had descended to burn the forest alive. The crowd recoiled, howls of fear rising into the canopy. And in the reflection of that silver inferno, Celine finally saw herself not as fragile, not as cursed, not as small. She was dangerous. She was power unshackled. Her heart broke with every flicker of flame that consumed the roots around her, but within the heartbreak, something else stirred, something sharp, something alive. She turned, not waiting for Selim's choice, not seeking his defense. Her feet carried her into the wild, fire trailing in her wake like a comet streaking across the night. Behind her, voices cried out. Some cursed her name. Some begged for mercy. Some held for Selim to strike her down. And Selim, his roar split the sky, a sound of agony and rage colliding. But still, he did not chase. For the first time, Celine no longer waited for anyone to catch her. The girl who had been blind and cast aside now burned a path the world could not ignore. And with every step into the darkness, she asked herself not if she was enough for him, but if he could ever be enough to withstand her fire. The ground had not known silence since Celine fled. Every root, every ancient stone, every tree that bore the weight of the moonlight seemed to hold its breath now, waiting for her return. And return she did, not as the broken, blind girl her clan had cast away, not as the fragile fugitive who had once stumbled through the fog, but as something wholly reborn. She stepped into the clearing, the night alive with the feral roars of rival alphas rallying against Selim's throne. Wolves circled in the shadows, their eyes burning like coals, their growls weaving together into a hymn of blood and rebellion. The scent of rage hung thick, of fur and steel and storm. Selim stood tall in their midst, bronze skin glistening with sweat and battle, chest rising and falling with the weight of a king defending everything he was. Yet even kings could fall, and the storm of enemies pressing in threatened to drown him. Then her voice cut through the night. Low, steady, laced with fire. Every head turned as Selene emerged, her bare feet silent upon the earth, her presence carrying more weight than legions. Her clan had called her cursed, but in this moment she bore herself as though the very gods had carved her from flame and shadow. Silver light coiled around her wrists like living chains, but instead of binding, they pulsed with freedom. Sparks gathered in her palms, flickering like stars torn from the heavens. With each step she took, the earth trembled, ancient stones deep beneath the soil stirring as if they recognized her blood. The ruins around them answered in kind, carved wolves in marble and moonstone ignited with spectral glow, their eyes alive with ghostly fire. Gasps filled the clearing. Some wolves stumbled back, others fell to their knees, not from fear, but from awe. Selene's chest rose as she inhaled deeply, and the silver flame surged higher, licking her skin without harm, spilling outward in a torrent of light that painted the night sky. The air split with a sound that was neither thunder nor wind, but something older, primal, unyielding. The prophecy whispered through the ages had arrived at last. I am not your curse, she declared, her blind eyes glowing brighter than any torch. Her voice quaked through every rib, every marrow, every breath in the clearing. I am your flame. Selim's storm-dark eyes widened. For years, he had borne the torment of fire that devoured every woman's touch. For years, he had believed himself condemned to loneliness, to the cruelty of divine punishment. Yet here she stood, untouchable by the curse, wielding a fire that matched his storms, a fire that did not destroy him but called to him. Around them, rival alphas lunged, unwilling to bow to fate. Their wolves surged forward, snarls tearing through the mist. But Selene raised her hand, and the silver inferno erupted outward. Trees bent as though bowing to her power. Flames did not consume, but commanded. The attacking wolves halted mid-leap, their eyes glazing, their bodies trembling as something greater than fear chained their will. One by one, they lowered themselves to the earth, heads pressed down in submission. The ruins themselves awoke fully, pillars splitting with radiant light as ancient runes bled silver fire. From the cracks poured whispers, echoes of voices long buried. Oracles, priests, warriors of a forgotten age, chanting in a language that resonated in every heart present. The blind one shall see beyond flesh. The alpha untouched shall burn or be reborn. The words wrapped themselves around the clearing, undeniable, inescapable. And from within the deepest fissure of the ruins, a shadow stirred. It was older than their clans, older than crowns, older than Selim's throne. A shape formed in the darkness, not wolf, not man, but something fractured, something ancient, something birthed from betrayal and bound in silence for centuries. Its eyes flared crimson, its body forged of smoke and bone, its growl a vibration that cracked the ground. The true enemy revealed itself, the ancient shadow that had sown the curse in Selim's veins, the architect of pain. Selene's silver flames clashed against its darkness, the clearing shaking under the collision of forces. Selim's storms rose to answer, lightning splitting the sky as rain lashed down in torrents. Fire and thunder, side by side, no longer curse and isolation but union and strength. Selene turned her face toward Selim, her blind gaze unwavering. Together, she whispered, her words barely audible over the storm, yet reaching him as though spoken directly into his soul. Selim's jaw tightened. The burn that once consumed him at a woman's touch was absent, here, now, with her. His hand closed over hers, lightning crackling against silver fire, their powers entwining. For the first time, he was not afraid to hold. The shadow howled, the ruins shuddering as stone toppled and fire blazed brighter. The world itself seemed to recognize the collision of prophecy and defiance. Wolves pressed their bellies to the earth, unable to rise beneath the weight of destiny manifest. Celine's flame surged higher, fueled not by rage, but by choice. She was no longer running from who she was, no longer begging to belong. She stood as what the gods had written her to be, and more, as what she chose to become. No man, no clan, no throne would dictate her worth. "I am not your sacrifice," she cried, her voice breaking through thunder and shadow alike. "I am not your ruin. I am the fire that will burn what has shackled us all." And with Selim's storm wrapped around her, with his lightning fusing into her flame, they unleashed a force that split the night itself. Darkness screamed, crumbling back into the void it had crawled from, its roar swallowed by the union of fire and storm. When silence fell, it was not the silence of fear. It was reverence. It was the silence of a world forever changed. Celine stood tall beside Selim, silver embers still curling from her fingertips, her breath steady, her body unyielding. Wolves that had once mocked, once hunted, once branded her an omen now bowed their heads willingly, their submission not to a curse, but to a queen. And Selim, Stormbringer, Alpha King, scarred by gods and broken by years of torment, looked upon her not as a savior, not as a tool of prophecy, but as the only flame that had ever warmed him instead of burned. Destiny had been rewritten, not by the gods, not by prophecy, but by two broken souls who chose to stand together against the world. Ash still drifted through the night air, glowing faintly as it settled on scorched earth and shattered stone. The ruins no longer whispered with prophecy, they pulsed with the weight of what had just been unleashed. Wolves crouched in stunned silence, eyes darting between their Alpha King and the woman who had become more than a legend. Some bowed their heads willingly, yet others recoiled, their whispers crawling like serpents through the crowd. Cursed. Dangerous. Too powerful. Celine stood in the center of it all, her breath steady though her hands trembled, silver embers fading slowly from her skin. The fire had not consumed her, it had revealed her. And yet in the quiet that followed, her heart carried a heavier weight than any battle. She turned her face towards Selim, blind eyes searching the storm that lived within his gaze. Her voice came soft, so fragile that it felt as though it might vanish with the wind, yet sharp enough to pierce through bone. "Would you have chosen me," she whispered, "or feared me too?" The words hung in the clearing like a blade. Selim's chest tightened. For years, his curse had made him fear every touch, every closeness, every promise of love. Yet here she was, the one who did not burn him, the one who turned fire into light instead of pain. His lips parted, but no sound came at first, only the flicker of storm in his eyes softening as they found her. Around them, the pack stirred. Whispers grew louder, muttered prayers, hushed accusations. Some spoke of salvation, others of ruin. Some saw a queen rising beside their king, others saw a curse wearing human skin. Celine felt it all, the weight of their doubt pressing against her ribs, the sting of their mistrust scratching against her skin like thorns. She wanted to turn away, to retreat into the darkness where no one's gaze could reach her. But she stood her ground, chin lifted, the echo of flames still alive in her veins. Selim stepped closer, the storm in his presence wrapping around her like a shield. His hand almost reached for hers, then hesitated, suspended between longing and the eyes of his people. In his silence lived 1,000 truths, his desire, his fear, his burden as king. The air thickened, every wolf waiting, every heart beating with the question Celine had spoken aloud. Would he choose her? Would he fear her too? And as that question lingered, stretching tight across the night, the story itself held its breath, balanced on the edge of fire and storm, love and ruin, destiny and choice. If this story lit something inside you, if your heart raced with theirs, if you long to know whether love can survive a world that fears its power, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that burn and heal, where love defies curses, and destiny is written in fire. The first light of dawn bled slowly across the sky, painting the ruins in strokes of pale gold and ash gray. Smoke curled from the broken stones, carrying with it the scent of fire, blood, and earth newly torn apart. The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence did not feel like peace, it felt like a pause, the sharp inhale before the world exhaled again with force. Celine stood at Selim's side, her hand resting just shy of his. The space between their fingers was thin as breath, yet it pulsed with a heat that neither dared to break, not here, not with so many eyes still watching. Her blind gaze turned toward the rising sun, its warmth brushing her face like a fragile promise. For the first time, she did not shrink from the light. She faced it as if it belonged to her. Selim's chest rose and fell in a heavy rhythm, the weight of his crown pressing invisibly upon his broad shoulders. Around him wolves knelt, some in reverence, some in fear. He could feel the cracks within his people, the rift Celine's fire had carved among them. Some would follow him into this new dawn with loyalty sealed in blood. Others would whisper rebellion in the shadows of the trees. And yet, as he looked at her, at the woman who had not burned him but instead set his soul alight, he knew his path. Whatever came, it would come with her beside him. The two of them stepped forward, leaving behind the broken remnants of prophecy and the trembling packs. Their strides were slow but sure, their bodies weary but unbowed. Each step toward the horizon felt like a vow spoken without words, together, no matter what storms the gods sent against them. But the earth itself had not finished speaking. A deep tremor rolled beneath their feet, subtle at first, then sharper, until stones cracked and dust leapt from the ground. The wolves around them stirred, hackles rising, ears flattening against skulls as growls spread like wildfire through the crowd. Celine froze, her heart thudding against her ribs as if it knew something she could not yet see. The air thickened, heavy with a darkness that was not of night, a chill that did not belong to morning. From the deepest shadow of the ruins, where firelight dared not reach, a voice emerged. It was not spoken aloud but threaded into every ear, every bone, every soul that stood upon the scorched earth. She is not the only one. The words slithered across the clearing, rich and jagged, ancient and merciless. Wolves whimpered, others bared teeth at the nothingness, yet none could deny the power that threaded through those syllables. Celine's hand instinctively reached for Selim's. This time, he did not hesitate. His fingers closed around hers, steadying, grounding, claiming. No burn. Only heat. The voice came again, darker, sharper, the ruinous truth hidden within its tone. The true alpha has yet to rise. Gasps broke through the crowd. A chill swept over them, colder than the bite of winter, sharper than the edge of a blade. If Celine was the flame, then something else, someone else, was waiting in shadow, destined to burn hotter, brighter, or perhaps more ruinously than even she. Selim's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing at the darkness as if he could face it head-on, as if his defiance alone could banish prophecy's cruelty. But deep in his chest, he knew the voice was not a threat to dismiss. It was a warning, a seed of fear planted in the soil of every heart. Celine's blind gaze lifted, her face turned toward the shadow though she could not see it. The faint trace of silver still shimmered along her wrist, the crescent flame that had marked her as chosen. Yet now, doubt whispered where certainty had begun to bloom. If she was not the only one, then who else had fate claimed? The dawn stretched wider, painting the sky in a brilliance too stark for the darkness that still lingered. Two forces collided on the horizon, light and shadow, promise and threat, love and ruin. And between them stood Celine and Selim, bound by curse, bound by fire, bound by a destiny that was no longer theirs alone. The tremors faded, the voice gone, but its echo remained. It would haunt every wolf, every whisper, every dream that followed this day. Selim tightened his grip on Celine's hand. She did not let go. Together, they walked toward the rising sun, their silhouettes cutting sharp against the blaze of light. Their steps were steady, but behind them the world watched with bated breath, already knowing the story was far from finished. The ground was still, but hearts were not. The dawn had come, yet shadows stretched longer than the light could chase. This wasn't over. Not even close.